Hey, it's Callan from Authentic Lifestyle Design, and today I want to talk to you about Spiral Dynamics Stage Blue. So, this is our fourth stage in Spiral Dynamics, and this will put us halfway through our series. So, we have a couple of levels. We've had Beige, which is our primitive survival level. We've had Purple, which is our tribal level or our survival in a group. We have Red, which is where all of a sudden you want to acquire more for yourself and it's all about power. And then we're moving from red up to blue, which is all about conformity and hierarchies and playing your role in your community, being a good citizen, things along those lines. And that is what we are going to talk about today. So, the model spiral dynamics comes from Chris Cohen and Don Beck, based off the research of a guy named Professor Claire Graves. So all credit goes to them, and this is not original source material. I'm not affiliated with those guys. This is just my stance and my sort of interpretation of the model, and I'm trying to bring it across to you guys the best I can. So yeah, blue is our fourth stage. It might be worth you going back and having a look at my introduction to spiral dynamics video, which actually introduces the model, because it's good to get a very broad look at the thing before we start diving into each stage. And you'll notice as the levels go higher, they're going to increase in complexity and they're going to get deeper. So stage blue is probably where the masses are in the world right now. This would be like our primary stage on this planet internationally. So let's jump into it and we'll have a look. Okay, we'll start with an overview of stage blue. So remember at red, the focus was on the self. It was on making yourself as big and powerful and mighty and pulling as many resources as possible. And doing that by any means, including violence. Stage blue isn't so much about that. Because remember, we have a pendulum as we move up that swings from self to community. From self to community. So we've started at self at beige, moved to community in purple, moved back to self for red, and now at blue we're back in community again. So there's a really strong focus on your immediate community, and that can be whatever community you identify with. So that could be the town you live in, that could be the country you live in, that could be an external community such as a sporting group or some political party you follow, whatever it is. There's a strong focus on all these different communities of blue. Okay. And there's also a heavy focus on doing the right thing. Now, right and wrong is subjective, but at blue, right and wrong is going to be dictated by the culture. And blue is very serious about doing the right thing by the culture, because they're looking into it like this. They're looking at the culture that they grew up in, that their parents were a part of this culture, now they're a part of this culture, and this culture has rules. And you remember at red, where they didn't really care about the rules and they just broke them all the time. Blue has sort of learned from that, and they've seen the destruction and the chaos that can cause. So blue is very strict on rules. And they have rules for all sorts of things. They have laws. And if you break those rules, there's punishments. And if you break those rules, you deserve those punishments because you broke the rules. That's the way that Stage Blue looks at this. The rules are set in stone, and it's important, and it will help your community if you do the right thing. Blue also focus heavily on doing their part in their community. So blue has a role. That could be anything, on any level of the hierarchies or spectrums, or however you want to look at it. Blue, you could be a construction worker and you identify fully with being that construction worker. And you see that as doing your part for your community. And there is a right way to build, and you're following these rules that you've been taught by your elders. And you're following those to construct things in a certain way, going by the book. Very regimented and very strict. And it's important that you do that. Same goes with school, where you're taught all this, that there's rules and that those rules have to be followed. And that you need to follow those rules and do your part in your community. That could be your school community. That could be the business you work in. But at the end of the day, it's important that you are doing what you are supposed to be doing. And that you as a little human being are contributing to something bigger than yourself. Another big one in stage blue is conforming to the culture. So if the culture are Christian, then you're Christian. If the culture don't like those people over the hill, then you don't like those people over the hill. If the culture focus heavily on dancing, then you'll focus heavily on dancing. So you're really conforming to that culture and you're trying to be a part of that culture, to be a part of something bigger than yourself. And you see this community and all the positives and all the beauty in it. And you compare that to the chaos or the perceived chaos you see the rest of the world in, where they're at red and where there's people fighting each other and killing each other over very mundane things. And you sort of feel like now you're above that, and in a way you are, because you've outgrown it and you've moved into blue. So here is some of the pros of stage blue. So the first one is people work well together. And this makes sense because, again, you have a culture and everyone's conforming to that culture. So if you have a group of people in a business and say they're all at blue, then they're going to work really well together if they have all the same belief systems. It's going to be super smooth. Really important. Such as the military from the photo here. People work well together because the idea is people have the same belief systems. They're here to do the same job. There's hierarchies and there's very clear roles of who's in charge and who's doing what. And that allows people to work extremely well together. And that's a very strong positive of blue. And that goes into the second one. Hierarchies work extremely well. Because if you're at a certain level, say you're a manager in a company, then you're very clearly a manager and that's your job. And you go by the book to follow your role as a manager. And you have your own responsibilities that you need and your own outcomes that you need to meet. And it's important that you do those. So hierarchies are very tailored here, very tight. And there's tremendous amounts of respect for people above you. That's where sayings come like respect your elders. That's a perfect example. Someone's older, they have more experience, therefore they deserve your respect. And sayings like this are very prominent at stage blue. If you're in a job and your boss is above you in the hierarchy, then you respect your boss. You do what your boss tells you to do, and so on. So hierarchies are significant. Another one is people look after each other because everyone is for the community and they're for spreading and making this community the best thing it possibly can be, which means that people are going to look after each other, even strangers. I mean, at red, if you came along someone that was injured and was no use to you, you probably wouldn't think much of that. At blue, though, it's very different. It's like they're your brother. They're a part of your big family, of your big community, of your country, or of your town, or whatever it is you identify with. So you're going to help that person. And that can be a very strong trait of blue. They can be very hospitable. For example, there's a lot of blue in the Middle East, and you hear stories from travelers all the time going through there, and they're treated beautifully by the people. Like they're pulled into people's houses and given home-cooked meals and all the rest of it, because these people have a really strong pull on community and they really enjoy giving, and it can be very gentle in this way. One of the very strong traits of blue and the real positives is they can be extremely humble and extremely hospitable people. Very giving, very, very giving people. Another one is it develops strong discipline, work ethic, and character. Military is also a fantastic example here. Because while you're following all these rules and you're respecting your superiors and you're doing all the things that are expected of you in the military, you're developing really strong discipline. You're getting up and you're shaving every morning, and then you're going and running drills, and then you're working, and then you're doing this, then you're doing that. And that's important that you develop this discipline, because if you're ever to go to war and be in a battle, it's important that your superiors can count on you to do your job. Because if you don't do your job, that means people could die, things could go wrong. And that goes into work ethic and character as well. So your culture at this level of blue is going to pull these things into you. You're going to be highly disciplined, highly effective. You're going to have a strong work ethic. You're going to have a good character. You're really going to embody and represent the communities that you're a part of. And that can have tremendous power. I know in my life an example is Okinawan martial arts, does this. It develops very strong discipline, work ethic, and character. And especially at this point in my life where I'm out in the country, having that discipline to go and train is very useful when there's not really people out here I can train with. Another one is that Stage Blue provides a strong sense of community and belonging. You're not just some loner trudging through life that's lost and trying to find meaning. You are a part of a community, and you identify strongly with that, and you belong to that community, and you'll do your best to lift that community up and to make it the best place possible. And that sense of community and belonging gives people very, very strong ties to that community. And this could be, something like the job you do, but it can also be faith. This can come under your religion. If you're a Christian and you go to church and you're surrounded by other Christians, and there's a really strong sense of belonging there and a really strong sense of spirituality where you're all coming together to experience this one thing, and you all belong and you all have similar beliefs and you all lift each other up to make each other the best versions of yourselves. Heaps of pros to that. Then the final one I have here is people feel like they're a part of something bigger, which is similar to belonging. It's like, it's not just I'm getting up and I'm going to my mechanical job and I'm working on cars and then I'm going home to my family and repeat, and that's not really interesting. It's kind of boring. It's not like that. The blue frame is I love to get up and work on these cars and do what I can for my community and to really serve people in this way, right? That's more the blue paradigm. And they feel like they're a part of a bigger organization, or if they're in a company, they feel like they are a part of that company and they are represented by that company. And you see that back in the 50s and 60s, especially partially the 70s, where companies would treat people like family and they'd really, really look after their employees. It's not like today where people are moving between jobs all the time. Very often someone would finish trade school or university, join a company, and they'd stay there for life. And they'd be progressed up the company if they had the skills, and they'd always be fully doing their job and doing the best they could do and feeling like they're a part of that bigger thing. Because blue really likes to be part of a community, regardless of what that community is. They love that sense of belonging. And that's why it's so healthy that if someone's at red and they're using violence and they're kind of trying to just seek material pleasures through whatever means necessary, that when they move to blue, all of a sudden there's a bigger cause than just what they individually want. There's a community, and now they're going after what that community wants. And that can be very fulfilling, very rich. Okay, so that's the pros of blue, and it sounds pretty good. Most of you watching this are going to be blue or above, okay? But there's also cons to blue, as there's cons to every stage. The first con is nonconformity is highly discouraged. So if you're born into a culture and you grow up and you go through their education system and all the rest of it, and for whatever reason you haven't conformed to that culture and you don't feel like a part of that culture and you don't feel like you belong, if you do things that are deemed as nonconformist by that culture, that's going to be heavily frowned upon and discouraged, and there can be consequences to that. People will stop associating with you. They'll see you as an outcast. And all of a sudden, this culture will sort of ignore you and even maybe not like you just because you're not conforming to all these rules and customs and hierarchies that everyone else is conforming to. And if you're a nonconformist in this respect, say if you grew up in Soviet Russia during the communist days when everyone was a communist and for Soviet Russia, and you were a capitalist, that would be very lonely to have that belief system when you're surrounded by everyone that has a different one. And if you express your viewpoints in some of these blue cultures, it could actually be dangerous. Because if you presented ideas that the culture deemed to be dangerous, they could lock you up, they could kill you, they could kick you out. So there was extreme kind of causes to this. There was extreme consequences. So it wasn't like today where you can go and become some hippie or go on whatever alternative path you want. Back then, if you did that, it was heavily frowned upon, and there would be some serious consequences if you made decisions that the culture didn't agree with. So that's one big con of blue. They're very set in their ways in this way. If you're a part of the culture, it's great and really homogenous, but if you're not, and if you express different beliefs, then all of a sudden it's not so nice. Second one is people struggle to see paradigms outside of their culture. So what I mean by this is if you grew up with a certain set of paradigms or belief systems, and then someone comes along, say from a different culture or from a different system, and they give you different beliefs, it's going to be really hard, if not impossible, for you to actually accept those beliefs. You can listen to them, but to actually embody and to understand what that person is saying is going to be hard. Because in your head, your belief systems are the correct belief systems. There's no other way. Your way is the best way. Your culture is the best culture. And because of that, it's very hard to accept and to understand other people's perspectives, especially if they heavily conflict from your perspective. And being able to hold multiple perspectives at once is not where Blue's at. There's a lot of psychological development and consciousness that has to come in before somebody can do that. At Blue, it's not like that at all. And they're really set in their own paradigms and really set in their own ways, especially once they get a bit older. You see someone that's a heavy stage Blue and they're in their 30s, they're probably going to be like that way forever. It's going to take a monumental event to change their belief systems in any way, for positive or for negative. So if Blue has negative belief systems that they deem to be true, then that can be harmful because it's very hard for someone to come in and change that. For example, let's talk about the Middle East again, where the women have to wear the burqas and all the rest of it due to their religion. And some are okay with that because it's primarily Blue culture over there. The majority of them are okay with that because they're a Blue and they grew up in the culture and they like the culture and they want to be a part of the community. But for the nonconformists over there that don't want to be wearing that, well, too bad, because if you take that off, there's going to be some serious consequences. And this is where if someone went over there and said, well, why do these women have to hide themselves, and can we maybe not do that? Or can they have the choice or the freedom to not do that if they wish? It's not going to work because the culture over there is so absolute on its viewpoints, and it's not going to be able to simply change like that. So the next thing is people may force their beliefs on others. And there's plenty of examples of this. You can look at the Nazis literally saying, okay, you can join us or you can die. And that join us or die mentality has been around a lot. Or you get what the British Empire and other European empires did, which is they'd sail to some country, such as I'm in Australia, the British would sail here. And they essentially, there was a thing called the Stolen Generation, and they basically tried to make the indigenous community here British. And they do that everywhere they go. They come in, they'd impose their beliefs, say Christianity, they'd spread Christianity and neglect whatever the spirituality was of the people who were already there, or whatever other system, and they'd come in with force sometimes, and it got to the level where if you don't agree with us, then we'll kill you, or we'll kick you out. So they're spreading because they're thinking, we've got the best belief system ever. It's worked so well over here. And it's so homogenous, and we can't really see anywhere else in the world that's like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to this neighboring country where there's a bunch of wars and a bunch of different conflicts, and we're going to convert them to our ways. We're going to show them how it's done. And we're not going to go over there politely and say, oh, here's an idea, here's something you could try. No, we're going to go over there and we're going to literally convert them to our ways. And that is useful. That's where I've got the chess pieces, the picture of the chess pieces. Because this one chess piece has walked over and gone, all right, you want to be like me? And they're saying, no, we do not want to be like you. And that results in conflict and results in the more powerful people taking over the less powerful people. And you understand that any red or below, red would not work in a community of 100,000, but blue works just fine with 100,000 people, right? So a blue organization is going to go over and absolutely dominate any lower level. And then you get conflicts like you get the world wars, which is essentially, it was really blue countries, You had Germany and you had Britain that were both blue and they both had strong belief systems. And Germany very heavily, very far blue and falling into a lot of the pitfalls of blue, going, right, we're going to take over, this is our belief system and we're going to spread it across all of Europe. And if you don't like it, then too bad. And yeah, very damaging. And then you get blue on blue. So you get a blue army going up against another blue army. And essentially that results in a heap of death and a heap of lost life and all this. And both sides have really strong belief systems, and they see the other side even as subhuman because their belief systems could be so different that they just see them as animals or savages or whatever. They can't understand the difference in culture, the difference in beliefs at this point. So it's alien to them, and they just don't understand, and they could see an opposing threat just as savage, as brutal, as ruthless. Okay, and the final one I've got here is black and white thinking, which comes back to Blue develops a set of beliefs and ideas and such as it grows up. And if something comes along to conflict that, it's not going to work. So Blue's going, okay, there is a way to do things. This is the way we do things. This is how it's done. And any alternatives are just going to seem silly. Because Blue's going to say, this is how it's done, and it's been done like this for hundreds of years, and it works. So we're going to do this. For example, slavery. That's one example. It was kind of pretty normal. Slavery was quite a normal thing. So everyone at Blue that grew up with slavery, they're going, no, this is how it's done. We've always had slaves. This is just how it works. Or think of the caste system over in India. Same thing. It's, no, this caste system is how it's always been, and it works. Don't mess with it. Right? When someone comes along and they're like, oh, why don't you free the slaves and let people work for an actual wage? And then all of a sudden everyone's so triggered by that because it's such a different idea. And it took a long time for that wave to move because they had to change people's minds. And changing somebody's mind at Blue is extremely difficult because they're so locked into their beliefs that there is a certain way to do things and there's a certain way to live. Say, for example, maybe that way is to grow up, go to school, get a job, have some kids, retire and die. And that's the paradigm they've set. If someone came along and said, well, you don't have to do that. You know, you could go to school online and travel around, and then you could work as a digital nomad and sort of live on the government benefits and travel around. And then at the end of the day, you'd never have kids and just drift around and maybe retire and become a monk, and then maybe open a monastery or start some kind of community, or something way out there. Or for example, you've got various cultures where people do a bunch of things. Say the tribes over in Mexico and stuff taking peyote and all that. No, we're just going to take peyote and walk around the wilderness and show people this medicine. Something like that would be so alien to someone not identified with that culture. And right and wrong are strong. And you can see this in religion as well, that there is a right religion. Our religion is correct, and there's so many walls about people just because they believe in a different God, or even different variants of the same God. Like you look at the Catholics and the Protestants, and the conflicts that have happened all over the world because of that, like in Northern Ireland, for example. And they believe in the same God, they just have some slightly different beliefs about that God. And even then, they're killing each other. So it's pretty crazy. So people get so attached to their beliefs that they'll kill people who are a threat to that belief system, because that's easier than changing. That's easier than adapting and integrating and accepting that we all believe different things and that we're such a diverse people as human beings on this planet. They're not ready for that. So there's many cons and pitfalls of Blue. Now let's have a look at some examples of stage Blue, some of which I've talked about, which is we've got the British Empire, because again, they were very blue. This is the way we do things, and this is the way our hierarchies are structured. And they're that example that wanted to go around and they wanted to convert everybody. So they'd show up to some island and they'd meet the local people and they'd basically try to convert them and make them British. Because the British thought they had the best thing going ever. They didn't see anywhere else in the world that had a similar quality of life. So they go around to these cultures that weren't as developed on the spiral. Maybe they're all purple and red. And they'd see them basically as savages and uneducated and uninformed. And they'd go, all right, well, let's make these guys British and let's improve their lives. And that was their paradigm. Even if they were doing something that wasn't improving their lives, if they were doing something that was leading to a lot of suffering, the paradigm the British were coming from is that, no, this is improving their lives. This is making them better. Next example I've got is the Japanese samurai. So there's a bit of red here. There's using violence and stuff to control people and all the rest of it. But there's also a strong blue because it's all about honor. Like look at seppuku, where they would stab themselves and commit suicide. That's a perfect example. It's like they've lost faith. So it's like, you have dishonored me, I have dishonored myself, and now I must. The only honorable thing to do is to commit suicide. So again, their beliefs are so strong that they believed that if they lost face or they did something dishonorable, that they had to kill themselves. And it was all honor. It was Bushido, or the samurai code, and they had to really follow that. And it was taken very, very seriously by the Japanese samurai. They're really fun to study if you ever get bored. Next one I've got is the Catholic Church, and not so much the Catholic Church now, right? In some parts of the world, yes, but think of the Catholic Church a few hundred years ago, where it's very rigid, very strong, and it almost plays part in government. You know, the God was the highest of all kings. So even kings and people that ran countries, they still bowed down to God. And the 10 Commandments, for example, are very direct. They're very black and white. It's, you should not do this. You shall not do this. You shall not kill. You shall not steal. And the consequences was, back in the day, it was essentially an eternity of suffering or going to hell. So it's like, okay, follow these rules and you'll die and receive eternal bliss, or don't follow these rules and die and you'll receive eternal suffering. So it was extremely black and white in that paradigm. And yeah, very hierarchical, very strong, but also all the pros, you know, a strong community focus. It kept the community together. Very often the church was in the center of a little town, and that's where everyone went on a Sunday, and that's where you saw John the butcher and, you know, Mary the librarian and whatever else. They'd all see him down in the church. Next example is the military, which shows many positives and negatives of blue. It comes from the discipline and all the positive sides of building you into a very well-structured, disciplined human being. But on the downside, it can also turn you into a bit of a drone, and it makes it harder. Some people lack the ability to freely think, and also people can get brainwashed into thinking a group of people across a planet are all evil, and you start to dehumanize them, which is sort of like what the Nazis did to the Jews. They dehumanized them, and then they'd run out and basically killed them because they saw them as subhuman, or they saw them as a threat, or as another thing. You're forgetting they're just human beings like what we are, because you've been brainwashed into that. But the military can be used very powerful. I sort of have always seen it as the immune system for a country. It's like, it'd be like having no military or no defense force would be like having a human body that doesn't have an immune system. It'd just be ripe for the taking for anyone that wanted to come get a piece of it. So very useful. And then going into the Nazis, which is the next level, they're an example of blue taken too far, which is where they've gone, okay, here's our belief system and here's how we want to do. And this is so good that we want to share it with the rest of the world. And then you get the Aryan race and superior people. And again, it's all hierarchical. It's we're better than you. And you can't be a part of our group, or maybe you can be a part of our group. But if you hang around and we don't want you here, that's going to result in your death. Because they're really strong in that way, okay? That's when you take blue too far. Next example here I've got is traditional martial arts, because this is probably the most blue part of my life, is Okinawan karate, because it's an incredible martial art. It's really useful and it's really effective in my opinion, and I've done a multitude of different martial arts, but it's also it puts you in your body quite well, I find, doing all the katas and all the internal stuff with your core, and it just makes you feel good in your body, which is a reason I really like it. But it's very hierarchical. You've got the belt system. You come in as a white belt and you climb up all the ranks and you get your black belt. And then there's different levels of black belt, and all these masters are all around the world. But there's that respect for your teacher and your respect for their teachers and all that has to be followed in the dojo. And on top of that respect for your teacher, there's also rules. So it's when you walk into the dojo, no matter where you are in the world, because it's enforced everywhere, you take your shoes off, you put them a certain way, you bow into the dojo, you say, "Onegai shimasu," you walk in, and there's a whole structure, there's a whole sequenced warm-ups and katas and forms, and it's very structured, and you do what you're told. If your instructor, sensei, says, "Do 100 punches," you don't go, "I don't feel like it," or "Why?" You just, "Yes, sensei," you do your 100 punches. So it's very blue in that way. It's very black and white. This is the way we behave in a dojo. Even to the level where if you don't follow those instructions, you can be asked to not train, just because it's a system. And it's a paradigm, whilst at training, whilst in that room, you have to conform to, and that respect has to be there. Now the last one here I've got is Western culture of the 1950s. So think of all those videos in the 1950s, and there's heaps of them, they're really interesting to look back at, that basically instruct young people how to behave. They model good and bad behavior according to the culture of mainly 1950s America at the time. And it's really useful watching that. It's really useful to look back on, because you can see how conformist it was. And they're saying, oh yeah, well maybe do what the cool kids are doing and then you'll be the rest. Or try conforming to the society and conforming to what makes you cool, and then maybe you'll be cool, and then maybe you'll be liked and appreciated by the community. There was nothing alternative in there. And you can see that in the 1960s when people started to break out of that conformity, when they're going, hang on, I don't want to conform to this, I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And this whole wave started, this whole counterculture started, which was extremely useful, because then all of a sudden people aren't really being like their parents, for most of history. People were like their parents and they followed the values and beliefs of their parents. Come into the 1960s and not so much, because people are starting to rebel and they're starting to see gaps in the system and limitations and all the rest of it, such as racism, that white people were superior to black people, and beliefs held at the time like that black people had to sit at the back of the bus, and that gay people, that homosexuality was a crime, and all these other things that were deemed as like the culture. Someone that's transgender, or someone that follows a different religion or whatever else. Back in the day, that would have been unheard of and completely unacceptable in 1950s America, right? When now, most rational people are completely fine to let people live however they want to live, as long as they're not hurting others. And that's pretty good, because people have opened their minds a lot since the 1950s. So there's a few examples of blue. Next thing, and the last thing we're going to talk about, is how to transcend stage blue to orange. So stage blue is our conformist hierarchical stage. What happens after that is, all of a sudden, it's like red. Purple, you were really homogenous and tribal and did what you wanted to do for the little tribe you were in. Then you come to red, and all of a sudden you want to dominate and you want to be powerful and strong and all the rest of it. Orange is quite similar. So you're blue and you're a part of this community. Orange, all of a sudden, you want to climb to the top of the hierarchy, and you want all the rewards that come with that. So if you're a man, you want to climb up, you want all the money, you want all the women, you want all the freedom, you want all the travels, you want all the status and all the respect and all of this that comes with being on top of the pyramid. So you make it your drive to get up that pyramid. So you're not just conforming and doing your job anymore. Now you've got this, what feels like a larger goal of, nope, I don't want the white picket fence. I want to climb up, and I want to become somebody, and I want people to know my name. Here's 4 ways you can do that. And the first one is to develop that desire to climb hierarchies. Go, yeah, I really like being, a mechanic in this company, and there's 100 mechanics, but maybe I could climb up to run this company, or I could climb up to be one of the higher managers or executives and make heaps of money, or maybe I could quit this and start my own business and then have 100 mechanics working for me, and then I can get a massive financial incentive and status and all these good things if I do that. So they're starting to want to climb the hierarchy rather than existing in the hierarchy. Now, stage blue climb hierarchies, but it's more just out of good work, and it's more out of service to the community. It's not out of individual gain. When at orange, it's about individual gain. It's, I want the best I can get, and I'm willing to work to get the best I can get. Next thing is focus more on your own self-development. So not in as far as how you can serve the community and be a good part of the machine, but now you're thinking, all right, how do I climb up and be better than all these other 100 mechanics, and how do I run the show, and how do I show my superiors, or how do I get the right people that are going to propel me into this success? Because they want to be known, they want to be as big as possible. Next one, is to explore the benefits of being on top. Because when you're at the top of the pyramid, what do you got? You got power. You've got many, many people working for you that are going to basically do what you tell them to do, that need you for money, that need you for survival. All of a sudden, you're one of the big dogs, and you can tell people what to do, and you have massive influence, and you have much more freedom up at the top, and you can bypass certain rules and things that people lower than you just could not. So you look at the benefits. There's a bunch of money up there. You'll be able to get all the most attractive partners up there. You'll be able to meet really interesting people. You'll be able to travel and go on all these luxury holidays. And everyone will respect you and know you and see you as successful. And you'll feel really good up there about yourself, right? Then the last one I've got here is to develop a desire to stand out from the crowd. So you don't just want to be John the mechanic that goes to work and goes to the pub with his friends and does all the average things. Now you want to be John the mechanical business owner who has 100 blokes working for him that everyone knows about in the town. He's like one of the biggest guys in the town, and he's friends with the mayor, and he knows all these people, and he knows all these celebrities, and he makes $1 million a year, and he's really successful. You want to be seen as that. You don't just want to be seen as average. You want to be seen as exceptional at whatever it is you do. Okay? That's going to start pulling you into orange. And you're going to get unclicked from all those little paradigms. All of a sudden, there isn't a right or wrong way to do something. It's whatever works. It's whatever's practical. So you use whatever's practical to get to the top. Whatever advantage you can get. All right? You want to get yourself as high and as up there and as integrated as possible at Orange. You want to run things. You want to become a real player. You don't just want to be a sheep, or what you hear is sheep, which are people that just conform to the rules. Now, you want to be a player. You want to really play the game of life. And materially, Orange is a highly materialistic stage. You want to materially live a very full, rich, successful, vibrant life at Orange. This is like peak ego. Peak ego right here at Orange. So when you're the most egocentric and you're literally trying to build that ego and to make it as big as possible and to identify yourself based on all these success and achievements and status and money and whatever else. That's how you transcend from blue to orange. And that's the next level in psychological development according to spiral dynamics. So I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, please give it a like to boost it in the algorithm and show people there's some value here. Leave a comment or start a discussion because I'd love that. And share it with anyone who you think might find it useful. So I've got 4 more of these to make. Yeah. So orange, green, yellow, and turquoise. 4 more levels we're going to explore here. And you'll notice in these videos the language I use is slightly different because I am switching paradigms. I'm looking at from a blue perspective. Next one of these will be looking from an orange perspective and so on. But once we get up to our top 2 levels, it's going to get complicated because most people just aren't there yet. But we're going to go anyway because it's fun. Enjoy the rest of your day.